countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey! It is now time for the Last Comic Shop podcast.
That is correct. We are opening it up, the shop that is, to newbies, to help them find their way underneath this comic book tent and maybe help them not get lost in the fog.
That's right, and we're keeping the lights on for the oldies and the moldies that are used to that fog. Some may be more well-versed in the fog than others, as we are going back and looking at a modern adaptation of a Golden Age character this week.
That's right. If you can remember the original Sandman, you probably look through a fog every single day because of your cataracts. That's right. He's been around for a long, long time.
He doesn't drive a cataract. It's a Bentley.
I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm not the only one that tells bad dad jokes. That also goes to my co-host, Chad Smith, as well as my other co-host, Jay Scott, and the wonderful Mikey Wood. And he joins us for another DC superhero classic. That's right.
The best.
We're talking DC, so why not bring Mikey Wood back for this week's show, all about the Sandman, the original Sandman, not Dream, not Morpheus, not whatever, but I guess that's where Sandman got his gas mask. Mikey, can you unpack that for me?
When Neil Gaiman created the Morpheus Sandman, the Dream Sandman, he took a nice reach back and did a bunch of sort of like whatever they call it, retrofitting. What do they call it in the Star Trek universe?
I think the word we're looking for was retcon.
Retcon. Thank you.
Retcon.
Retrofit is when they change the engines on the Enterprise.
Yes, that's when they went from the old Enterprise from the TV show to the new Enterprise from first movie before it got blown up in the second movie.
That's right. But he tied a bunch of stuff together, and one of the things that he included was the fact that when Dream had been captured and imprisoned for those, 30 years or something, there was a sleepy sickness, and Wesley Dodds was having nightmares, and yes, they tied his story in that story, and there's a wonderful one-shot called Sandman Midnight Theater, which is the only time that Wesley Dodds meets Morpheus. And it's a really, Teddy Christensen does the artwork for it. It's really good. But we're not talking about that. This is based on the original Sandman, who was basically your costumed hero with a knockout gun. He's the Green Hornet. They're all kind of... Let's see, Green Hornet was 1936. Yes. So Green Hornet predates Sandman by about 2 years. So that, and they used to do that they did that all the time. There was, Crimson Avenger and all of these.
It might be why he wore a green business suit and a World War I gas mask. But I think, and a cape. And he had a cape.
Yeah.
An inexplicable cape. I guess capes go with green three-piece suits.
A three-piece suit and a cape. He looked like a magician.
That was the thing back in the day. Very Mandrake the Magician almost.
Mandrake. And Zatanna at the time was around at that. Zatanna being just a ripoff of Mandrake, and everything fed off of everything else, and that's kind of what the wonder, because there was no copyright thing, just didn't exist. Like nobody
cared.
Shit. Yeah, they just kind of
played fast and loose. Now, hold on, wait, before we go too far, there was the Matt Wagner Sandman Mystery Theater series that ran alongside the Vertigo stuff. Was that tied into the Neil Gaiman Sandman as well, or was that its own thing?
It kind of followed its own storylines and stuff like that, but that Midnight Theater thing is actually a crossover between the Mystery Theater book and the Sandman book. So they are going on. That Sandman Mystery Theater book is like the pinnacle of this character. Like, it's such a good run of books, and that's available now in collected editions and things like that. So it's just
the Wesley Dodds Sandman. This was not the Jack Kirby Sandman, right?
No, this was.
But he was around in the 40s and 50s, or
this was Gardner Fox's. I think Gardner Fox came up with him.
Gardner Fox and Bert Christman,
and then Jack Kirby came in later and did the more superhero.
First appearance was 1938 in New York World's Fair Comics.
That's right. Like he had the old school gas mask on for a few years. You know, the fedora hat wearing kind of mystery man thing sort of fell by the wayside somewhere in the like 40s, and he just became sort of another spandex wearing superhero, and he had a little sidekick named Sandy. And,
Sandy the Golden Boy. And he joined the Justice Society.
He's been around for a very, very long time. But the Matt Wagner version of Wesley Dodds is kind of cool because he's just this sort of like frumpy kind of guy. He's not like in the greatest shape or anything like that, but he's got insomnia and he decides to go fight crime. And it's just a really great.
He does also sort of fulfill a lot of those 1940s tropes where he's a rich bachelor, got loads of money, and nothing to do with his time except go around fighting crime.
It's like the 1960s, and like every dad had to have like cute, precocious kids, but where were the moms? Where were the moms? Like everybody was raised by single dads so they could mix it up with the hot young things and still give out some homespun wisdom on the side. It's crazy. Plus they had lots of clocks and secret passages behind clocks, right? Like
like
books that opened and.
Regardless, speaking of books, we should get around to talking about the book that we actually are covering this week. Chad, what are we covering that spawned all this Sandman talk?
All right, kids, this week we are going to be talking about Wesley Dodds' Sandman, a 6-issue series that came out within the past year or so from DC. But before that happens, I think, Andy, there was something that J.A. wanted to talk about?
Oh, yes. Yeah. No way. J.A. has been champing at the bit to talk about... it's almost like a public service announcement or something.
It is. I want to talk about it because some people might not know that these services exist, but also to celebrate the rest of the team, the three of you who came together and worked diligently to put this together for me. I mean, I'm just absolutely gobsmacked. So I wanted to have that chance to say thank you. What I'm talking about is over the past year, the Last Comic Shop team has scoured dollar bins to collect the entire Unity saga from Valiant. And this was a crossover event that took place in the 90s in the Valiant universe. And what makes this special and something that you're never going to see in print again is that it had licensed characters in it that Valiant no longer owns the rights to. So Solar, Man of the Atom, and Magnus the Robot Fighter are in this crossover, which means you're never going to see those issues reprinted because Valiant just doesn't have the rights to those books. I, being an omnibus collector, wanted to have this in an omnibus, but it's not getting printed. Never. It will never be printed. I could, but
never
that doesn't
say
mean
never. There's amalgam omnibuses hitting.
Yeah, exactly. They put out ROM and Micronauts after I spent like 1,000 years finding all those issues of ROM, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Anyways, go on.
And don't get me started. Me having to go to Poland to buy my first omnibus of Savage Sword of Conan because Marvel was losing the rights to that. Anyways, there is a way that you can collect these comic books. Say you have a run, 12 issues, 15 issues. This was 22 issues. You collect whatever you want to put together. In our case, it was the Valiant Unity crossover, and you send it off to this binding house. And now I'm going to defer to Mikey Wood because he was the project manager of this endeavor. Tell us about how you found this printing house, what you have to do, how you communicate with them, and sort of turnaround times and how involved or uninvolved you can be.
So there's a few of these companies out there that do it, actually. And the one I use is called Hoshin. I think Hoshin Bindery, Houchen. And they are located in Utica, Nebraska. And they're not paying me to say this stuff or anything like that.
They don't even know.
They don't even know I'm saying this stuff. If they hear this, I would love a discount. They it's Hoshin Bindery Limited. Their website is hfgroup.com. H as in Harry, F as in Frank, group as in bunch of people.com. And I first found that service out because of somebody who posted a collected edition or something that they made. It was like on the Bendis board like a bunch of years ago. I think like in 2007 or 8 or something like that. Back then, you know, I went and I sent out 2 books. At the time, it was The Complete Moon Shadow, which they have since collected in a beautiful hardcover from Dark Horse, and then a book called Automatic Kafka. What they do is it's called library binding, and what it is it's you know, in a high school or your local library occasionally has books upon books of, say, hardcover bound magazines, you know, or volumes of you know, medical reports sometimes. Or I know that my wife got her thesis in grad school made that way. That's what they usually do. And somewhere along the line, they started doing comics. And back then, you had to sort of prep your books. So you had to like pull all the staples out of the spines and kind of do all this stuff. And they just had a simple kind of like cloth covers that you would pick from, some gold stamping on the side for the titles. But since then, it has grown into something where they offer a service where they can create a cover image for you if you need them to. In my case, since I have graphic design background and in Photoshop and all that, I just create my own covers, and that's what I did for yours. Is I just kind of gathered up a bunch of decent images and tweaked things that I could find and recreated logos and laid it all out in Photoshop. They give you the measurements. So how it works is that you take your comics in whatever order you want them to be, and you can even add additional back matter. That's what I did with your Unity book. I found a PDF, a really clean PDF of some interview stuff from prior to the Unity saga starting, and some sort of like black and white images of cover art and things like that, production art. I just kind of printed it out on decent paper and trimmed it down to about the same size as a comic book and included that in the stack. And you just kind of put the books all in a nice stack in the order that you want them to. You fill out one of these order forms that they have available on their webpage, and you ship it out to them. They will receive it, and they will press them and glue the spines and sew the spines. And there's varied styles of binding that you can order. They offer different ones. Some of them are more expensive. Some of them are, you know. I've always used the least expensive one, and it's always worked perfectly fine. They're beautiful, and they send them back to you. Now it takes quite a bit of time to get these back, because really their primary business is schools and things to that effect. You know, it does take 3-4 months to get things back, and they've recently changed their process. So now what'll happen is they'll receive your books, they will start the process of it, and they'll send you an invoice, and you pay them the invoice, and then when they complete everything, they'll send you the shipping cost, but honestly, they basically work out to be about like $50 a piece, $55 a piece, something like that. It's really,
and they look beautiful.
They really do. Like the one thing to understand is that what you are doing is you are binding your actual comics. Like I have 2 volumes worth of Blackhawk books, and some of those Blackhawk books that I pulled out of dollar bins were kind of on the yellow end, you know, and they're going to stay that way. But I choose to tear out any kind of pages that might include double-sided ads. I tear off back covers unless it's like a wraparound cover or something like that. If it's not essential to the story, I'll yoink it out. You don't have to if you want to keep them all in there. Like some people love watching the Star Wars Holiday Special with the commercials still in it on YouTube. You know, you can do it's the same kind of thing, but you are binding the actual books that you purchase.
Which Andy brought up a point about Valiant. One of the nice parts about Valiant in the early 90s was what separated them from some of the Marvels and DCs of the day. That
paper stock is, I want to say it's glossy. I don't want to say it's like the most high end, but it's definitely not the same as the newsprint that you would get in some of the Marvel issues at that same time. I feel like this book is going to hold up much better long term for JA, just because of the printing process that Valiant had at the time.
And
had that outstanding coloring process. Like they were ahead of the game in the 90s. So good color, good paper, all that's translating.
What was it? Laser color printing. They'd gotten away from 4-color printing.
Yeah, and you know, it's a good way to collect things. I mean, companies are kind of collecting everything nowadays, but I'm sure there are some things that will, like this, like the Unity Saga thing, that will never see print again. And one of the things that I had done was IDW, their Ghostbusters run. They did 3 really, really nice hardcovers of their Ghostbusters run, but the second
Mikey,
one,
let me hit the pause button on you here. I just want to tell people, in case your eyes have glazed over a little bit, pay attention, damn it, because every collector that's gotten those fancy collections has gone through this at some point or another. Mikey, what's happened with the Ghostbusters run from IDW?
Oh, well, they lost the rights to the characters. The second volume was apparently, I don't know if it was short printed or what, but the second volume was like $300-$400 to buy it on the secondary market. And that's what happens with these omnibuses a lot of times. Like right now, I'm looking to try to get the Marvel Aliens second book, and until they reprint it, it's out there for like $200-$300, and I'm not spending that much money on it. Like, I'm sorry. Yeah. But so what I did was I just gathered up everything that was included in that hardcover, sent it out to Hoshin, basically replicated the entire cover that was on that second hardcover, and I have essentially a facsimile version of that hardcover that's just slightly smaller because those hardcovers were printed in a larger scale. These just stay at your comic book scale. So
that ability to sort of collect whatever you want and have it all printed out. That's why Chad for Christmas this year is going to get the entire Krakoan Age, but only the charts and graphs.
Sorry, I just threw up in my mouth.
Yeah,
but
so
seriously, folks, these are your comics, right? Mm-hmm. These are the comics that you found. We found these Valiant issues in buck bins. We bought them. We paid for them. They're our comics, and we were able to put them together in a nice collection for JA. And that's so great, I think.
Yeah, and there are tons of runs out there that even the big two, I'm still waiting for my Ann Nesenti, John Romita Jr. Daredevil, like my favorite run of all time, is not collected in a fancy hardcover omnibus or at any classy presentation like Mikey's able to achieve here.
Well, here's something that you can do too, and since you mentioned that, I have the 2 or 3 volumes, I can't remember what it is, Ann Nesenti Epic Collections from Marvel. You could, in theory, if you wanted to, take those Epic Collections. Now, for this, they do actually tear the covers off because of what they're made out of. But you could take those Epic Collections, send them out to Hoshin, and have them bound together into an omnibus.
Which is class that stuff up.
Even if you wanted to bind like the first 20, 30 comics that you remember reading when you were a kid into just like a memory book or something, you can do that. If you wanted to do trade paperbacks, you can do that. It's just a really nice package. It's a really nice way to get these.
And I think it just illustrates just another way that people can consume and collect comic books. It doesn't always have to be in single issue form. It doesn't have to be in officially produced omnibuses and hardbacks from the publishers. There are other options you can have if you want to preserve your comic books, and you don't necessarily just have to keep them in long boxes or short boxes. Now, there could be, there's, I'm sure, purists out there saying, you're destroying the value of the comic book. I mean, this entire run, as we said, we got it in buck bins. We could probably put together another run of the Unity crossover from buck bins and have them as single issue. This is just a much more approachable, easy way to read it and enjoy it.
Oh, yeah.
Looks nice
you're
on the
missing
shelf.
the skeleton at you for those issues, just flopping around everywhere and doesn't look neat or doesn't look organized. You bring home this classy hardcover collection.
That's right.
She's going to want to know how much you spent on that.
That's right. That's right. Well, and it looks really nice on the shelf. And what I can do is I can actually offer us a segue. One of the books that I first collected together and got bound and used a graphic cover for was the run of Sandman Mystery Theater by Matt Wagner et al. And I have 2 volumes of Sandman Mystery Theater in a hardcover that are just mine. The Sandman thing, that's my way of segueing into the book that we're going to talk about this
right.
weekend. How about it?
We will be right back with more Last Comic Shop right after these commercial breaks with our review of Wesley Dodds' Sandman, the book for this week. Stay tuned for that.
Yes, so if you fell asleep after that last segment, keep dreaming.
Hi, it's Carlo Calantuan, Last Comic Shop podcast listener and comic book tragic here in the Philippines. Mabuhay! When I'm in the US, I'm always on the lookout for a good deal on boards, bags, boxes, and all other manner of comic book related supplies. And that's why I love to go to bcwsupplies.com and use the promo code LCSPOD to get 10% off of all my orders. Not only do I get a discount on everything I buy at BCW, but I'm able to support the podcast when I use LCSPOD at checkout. So if you're in need of comic book supplies, head over to bcwsupplies.com and use the promo code LCSPOD. Oh, and guys, I'm still waiting for that Trestle review. Come on, when is it?
Bonjour, this is Geeky Old Hog, and I've got a nice little YouTube channel where I review the latest comics and occasionally bang on about the old ones. Why should you bother? I hear you cry. Well, I'm a published writer of comics. I had 6 shops back in the day, and I've been a collector for 50 years. Yeah, that's why there's an O and an L in the middle of Geeky and Hog. I'm clever like that. So, if you fancy it, reviewing the new ones weekly and then looking at artists and stuff, on the side, as the actress said to the bishop, everyone is welcome. Geeky Old Hog, all one word, over on YouTube.
All right, we're back with more Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for our Read Pile Review. Yes, that time of every single show where I get to pick the book. Yeah. It happens once in a while that I actually get to pick the book. But then again, I get to pick the books all the time because I tell these guys, I'm like, hey, you used to like that book. Why don't we do that one? And they're like, sure I do. Especially Chad. It's like less work for Chad to do. He's like, I like it when Andy picks things for us.
Yeah, it's real easy. Let's read Deadpool. What's the matter, bud? Let's do Squirrel. I'm so excited about Squirrel Girl now.
Yes.
We have to do Squirrel Girl soon.
Finally coming up in the second year of Chad. But we're not talking about Squirrel Girl this week. We're talking about Sandman. Wesley Dodds Sandman. As Mikey Wood pointed out many times throughout this week's show, that there was another book out there called Sandman Mystery Theater. While everybody was reading the Morpheus Sandman back in the day, I was reading the Sandman Mystery Theater because I was a huge nut when it came to Golden Age characters. I loved them. Absolutely loved them. So that fit me to a T. So when this book came out on the market, I was like, sure, here's my cash. And who was I giving that cash to? Well, by proxy of the work that they did for DC, Chad.
Well, Robert Venditti and Riley Rossmo and Ivan Placencia, who did the colors there. But this was a 6-issue miniseries, started in December of last year and continued on through this year. It was supposed to be the start of a big Justice Society initiative at DC, where it remains to be seen whether that's going to continue. But it came out alongside Jay Garrick and an Alan Scott Green Lantern book. And I don't know if the fruits of those have actually happened or not. Mikey, have they? Do you know?
There's a Justice Society book. Yeah, they kind of tie into that a little bit. All 3 of those are really, really good. And I know we're only talking about one of them, but all 3 of those little 6-issue series tie into the Justice Society book, which I think is ending with issue 12. I think maybe, I'm not sure, but it's really good. It's been plagued with a little bit of like running behind and stuff like that. But
okay. Well, speaking of this particular 6-issue miniseries, J.A. Scott is going to give us the 10-cent synopsis. Now, you're going to keep this because it's a mystery, right? Like, there's a mystery.
Yeah, it's a mystery, and it's only 6 issues long, so this is going to be very brief 10-cent synopsis. I'll give you the setup. Essentially, it starts out Wesley Dodds, this bachelor millionaire living in a house that looks like it's in the middle of Central Park because people are always walking by
with their pet poodles.
With their dogs. Anyways, this takes place in 1940. War has arrived in Europe, but America were slow to join in fighting Hitler. Not one of our better moments. He's trying to sell the War Department on non-lethal gas variants. And there's this whole backstory about his dad fighting in World War I and the horrors of gas in World War I. But to get to that non-lethal gas variants. He's created a lot of really lethal gas variants, killed a lot of rats in the process of trying to create a non-lethal gas substitute. Army doesn't buy it, literally. And the next day, his house is burned down and ransacked, and somebody has found his secret lair and absconded with not only his various suits and gas masks that he uses as the Sandman, but also his journal with all of his research and all of these horrible poisonous gases he's created. And the entire 6 issues then is him trying to track down the perpetrator of this crime and stop this journal of hideous gas from being released onto the world.
That's right. Mm-hmm. He didn't need baked beans for all that terrible gas. It was he just wrote it down of cabbage, 2 parts, 1. Now it was I wanted to read this because, again, anytime I see the Golden Age Sandman with his gas mask and his 3-piece suit, I immediately think of the Green Hornet, and I'm a huge Green Hornet fan. So, like, when I was looking for other characters, I was just like, I got to get a Green Hornet fix, but what other superheroes can I read? I gravitated towards Gardner Fox's Sandman. And so when I saw that this series was coming out, I wanted to read it. Now, that being said, once I've read it, I do like Robert's writing overall. I think we did a book of his previously on the last comic shop with Superman 78. I liked his run on Eternal Warrior at Valiant. I think he's a really good writer. It's just that, I'm going to be very honest, I think this is a story I've read about 18 times prior to this book. This is pretty much every single Golden Age guy with a gas mask running around, bad guy steals his stuff. He even has, like, his secret lair in the same places that, like, Batman would have his lair. There's a lot of repetitiveness in the Sandman story, which led me to be, like, I hate to say it, a little bit bored with the story. Did you feel a little bit of boredom or no?
No.
It was paint by numbers, but
all the stories
are paint by numbers. Kind of see the villain coming a mile away.
Oh yeah. Like, you see him, like, the main villain, like, right off the bat. But
although there was one thing I was expecting that didn't happen, I fully expected a certain character to be a bad guy, and they were not.
Yep.
So that was nice.
Yeah. How about that? I still don't understand that issue. That issue happened. I mean, again, we're not going to give total spoilers because this is like a mystery and we want you to read it for yourself. But there is one particular issue that comes in. The Sandman's main antagonist is somebody called the Fall.
Who's Sandman Venom?
Yeah. He dresses up in the same costume except it's a black trench coat, whatever. But long story short, like, he shows up at one point and you think it's going to be person X. And then you look at it and you're like, who is this?
Who the hell is that guy? Yeah.
They throw you a little bit of a curveball there.
The thing was, it wasn't even a curveball because that person wasn't in any other issue. It's not like they introduced him as like a secondary character or something. He was just like, he shows up and he's like, I'm still the Fog. And I'm like, good for you, buddy. Good for you, champ.
He wasn't in it earlier? I thought he was kind of. I don't think
so.
Oh, I mean,
come on. Did you recognize him at all? Like, I don't.
No. When he's unmasked, I'm like, who is that?
At first I was like, I don't get it. But what's cool is, like, it was sort of like he turns out to be kind of nobody.
Oh, it's not who I thought he was.
Yeah.
This nobody randomly that comes into the plots. I don't know, Chad.
So I have been a super grouch the last few months with books. I realized, and this, I enjoyed it. Now, like Jay said, it's paint by numbers, but I thought this was the Marvel movie version of Golden Age character. You know, they meet their equal but opposite. And I got notes of, I don't know, just with the Wesley Dodds and the characterization of Wesley Dodds as the pacifist, you know, who's out there fighting crime. I felt the conflicted nature, that's at the heart of a lot of the old MCU heroes. It was just a fun romp. We haven't talked about the art very much yet.
Yeah.
But when Riley Rossmo cuts loose on those double-page spreads especially.
Oh, when he's going through those dream sequences? Oh, yeah.
No, I am going to say, for as much as I just decried the plot of this particular story, I am going to applaud and praise the art in this book. If this was an ongoing series every single month, I would buy it just simply for the art. It was gorgeous. And gorgeous in a way that, like, again, it's not like your traditional gorgeous looking art. It was different. It was special. It was something unique and specific to that particular character and just genre. Again, the dream sequences, the use of the colors, the use of, I don't know, the panel layout.
I like how Wesley Dodds is very much sort of an everyman hero. You can see, he's not this jacked up Bruce Wayne kung fu master superhero with Jake Gyllenhaal levels of body fat on him. He's a normal, almost frumpy looking in some of the drawings.
Right. I imagine him. That's Steve Ditko grown up Peter Parker.
Yeah.
Genre meter never takes over and makes him sexy. Like,
right.
Rossmo's he's just amazing. Like I've followed him since he did Cowboy Ninja Viking. And that's the first place that he kind of caught my eye. And he's not everybody's cuppa, Like I know he did a bunch of issues of a Tim Drake Robin book that people did not warm up to, and I think it was more the writing than his art in it necessarily. But anything he draws, I'll buy. Anything.
There's a certain level of cartooning here that is. But at the same time, when it needs to get grotesque, it gets grotesque.
Yeah.
And when it needs to get imaginative,
So there's one page, early on in one of the issues where he, walks into a nightclub and there's a jazz band playing, and it's like a big, giant sort of splash page thing, and it's just amazing.
Then you can see the neon musical notes floating through the air, and, you could read a whole book about that. And it
just phenomenal. Great. Yeah.
I do want to comment one thing about the art, and that's, I guess, going back to the Wesley Dodd character. Maybe it is, again, my bias for, you have to have these jacked up guys like, Bruce Wayne or whatever. But, simply put, anytime I would see Wesley Dodds with his big googly glasses, and he was kind of spindly looking and whatever, and then he puts on the Sandman gear, and then he switches gears, and all of a sudden some of the fight sequences, he can handle himself in a real fight, and that juxtaposition for me sometimes was really jarring. I'm like, there is no way this guy would get snapped like a twig. There's no way this guy is eating his cream of wheat and then going out and being the Dark Avenger of evil. I couldn't put those two things together. Did anybody else struggle with that?
No.
No. In fact, I liked the fight sequences because I thought they looked a little bit more realistic. They're like the James Bond fight from Russia with Love on the train. It's two equal combatants just kind of smashing and punching and flailing at each other. Nothing super choreographed. No, Matrix style kung fu moves.
It's sloppy, but in the best way, the way that the real fight would be.
Yeah.
I didn't buy it, and I never understood the gas. It was a sleep gas, but then it also made people want to confess their greatest sins and stuff. Can somebody unpack that for me?
Well, he used the original 1930s Sandman, used a sleeping gas gun to sedate criminals. Mm-hmm. So they've taken that, and I think they've put a little bit of a spin on it, added a bit of the Morpheus thing where not only is it sedating you, but the chemicals are forcing you to sort of empathize with all these people that you've done bad things to. So you're having, not only are you getting knocked out, but you're having this, you have to go through this penance.
Emotional journey back before you can wake up.
You have some emotional damage.
That clip is awesome. And those scenes are really, really cool. Those scenes of seeing the gangsters kind of going through their inner turmoil and seeing what it is that they actually do to each other or do to other people. And
Yeah.
you know, everybody's cool. Diane, the character of Diane is awesome. You know, she's not just kind of a, you know, she's sort of just your standard damsel, but not really. You know, she's Diane Belmont. You know,
Yeah, she's resourceful.
Yeah, and her
She's
dad.
pulling files from the police station. And
Yep, her dad's the commissioner thing. It was just a slick book. I just really
No,
dug.
I agree that the art was super slick. Like, I could take that art again every single thing. There's just some inconsistencies.
Yeah.
And again, I think I kept on comparing him to the Green Hornet, which I'll get to in my review later.
And then you get that nice little post-credit scene at the end of the last issue where the Justice Society shows up, the original Justice Society, where you got the Flash with the helmet and Hawkman looks like Hawkman. I guess he always looked the same.
Yeah.
And a bunch of other ones that I don't recognize.
Oh, come on. A couple other ones.
Well, there's Green
Spectre,
Lantern,
Dr. Fate.
Oh, Dr. Fate. Yeah, I can recognize
Dr. Fate and the Spectre and the Green Lantern. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna. Did anybody ever read the Jeff Johns Justice Society?
Yeah, I have the omnibuses over there. I haven't read all of them, but I have them. Yeah.
Who's this dude in the red? I'm looking at the Justice Society panel.
That's Johnny Thunder.
Oh, that's Johnny Thunder. That's the Thunderbolt.
Yeah,
and the
there's
guy next to Hawkman.
Hourman. They meet at the nightclub. They're like,
What does
this is
Hourman
Rexy.
do?
Hourman takes a pill that gives him strength for an hour.
And eventually they retconned it to be like a form of steroids.
Yeah, it's Miraculo. Miraculo.
Okay.
I think it was in the 80s or whatever, but they made it like that to make it more topical, like, you know, that this
Like
was
steroids good or steroids bad?
steroids bad. Like, that he
And
got,
he's in a story. He's in one of the storylines in Mystery Theater. Actually, the Hour Man comes in.
but in this particular book, he meets him at the nightclub. He's like, oh, this is Rex so and so, and that's
So then he looks around and he's like, oh, Hawkman's in the Hall of Fame. Dr. Fate's in the Hall of Fame, but because I did steroids, I don't get in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, right. Yeah, those are and they do tie together. It's a nice sort of 1, 2, 3 reading if you read this Sandman book and then the Alan Scott Green Lantern book, but they're 3 different vibes, and this one's very very firmly Golden Age, which I liked about this Sandman book. And like you said, it's cliche. It's kind of cliche, but there's a reason those tropes are what we recognize as tropes. They're kind of classic storytelling beats of I mean, if you enjoy that kind of thing and you want to see where they can take it, then there's always that Sandman Mystery Theater book, which this fits very, very well with. So.
Well, let's go ahead and get to our ratings of this book, and we'll be doing that right after this commercial break, so stay tuned for more Last Comic Shop.
What happens when 20-something Madison is zapped into old-time radio shows? No technology.
I want to go to voicemail.
No Starbucks.
Don't call yourself a coffee shop if you only sell drip coffee.
And no one is PC.
I don't need no lip from...
Were you about to say woman? Because I'm wearing a gun and I have no idea how to use it.
Madison on the Air serves to highlight the way we were and the way we are today with original radio drama scripts adapted to include the modern-day Madison as she joins famous characters from radio's past, including Sergeant Joe Friday.
Just the facts, ma'am. I've never actually said that.
Marshal Matt Dillon.
We're not having a shootout with a 10-year-old kid.
I'm too woke to be a part of this.
Superman.
I didn't realize how cold it would be flying like this.
I have to get into the higher atmosphere.
And many more. Visit us on the web at madisonontheair.com or find us pretty much any place podcasts can be found.
You talk so old-timey. I have no idea what you said, but it's adorbs.
Hello, Last Comic Shop listeners. This is John from Part-Time Comics. You may have heard of our great series Drumsticks of Doom or Child Possession Services, but we have a new series coming out in 2024, LCS. A series of global catastrophes has left life on Earth decimated and made comic collecting a huge disaster. Follow a group of survivors as they run the Last Comic Shop. You can find more information on any of these books at linktree/part-time comics. That's part-time comics with an X.
All right, we're back with more of the Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for our rating. where we hope that you don't fall asleep on these ratings because they might inform your choice of whether you're going to pick this up at your local comic book shop or not. I don't know if anybody pays attention to what we rate these books and says, you know what, because JA gave it a 3.25 and not a 3.5, I think I'm going to pass on that.
As they all care for the year-end data review.
I think if we all rate something like a 1, people probably, well, I don't know, either they're like, I'm not touching that, or I want to see how bad this truly is.
Oh, yeah. I've had people come up to me and say, I want to read The Star Wars.
Yeah. So maybe anything that's in that 2 to 3 range, they're like, it's just an average book. I'll pick it up whenever.
Short Box George was like, I don't agree with anything Chad says, but he has good recommendations.
That's right.
It's the best backhanded compliment I got.
That's right.
You know what? We're going to get George to come on for your Squirrel Girl show. I want to see him read one of your favorite series and see what he thinks about it. So stay tuned for that coming up later this year. Any case, what's our 1 out of 4 scale for Wesley Dodds' Sandman, Jay?
1 out of 4 gas clouds.
Yeah. I mean, what else was I going to use as the sound effect? I mean, come on now. We're all adults here.
I want to make a Golden Age Sandman movie where that's his gas gun is like every time he. Oh no, it's the Sandman! Evildoers! Yeah.
He's had too much fiber today.
That would truly strike fear into the hearts of men.
We've reached people
would be running
of podcasts now.
People would be running. They would be running away.
More fiber in the diet.
So we'll start off with Mikey Wood. He is a long-standing fan of the Sandman character in all its various shapes and forms.
Yeah.
Mikey, what'd you think of this series?
I really, really enjoyed this. I think it's like 3.5. Like I really, I mean my recommendation is a Riley Rossmo book actually since we read this one because I love his stuff so much. And he follows me on Twitter, so I'll be sure to. I don't know if he follows me, but I follow him. And I'll be sure to.
I stalk him regularly.
Yes. He does this thing that a lot of artists do, where he'll post a piece of artwork and it's amazing, and he's like, "I can't tell you what it's from," because they're contractually obligated to not say anything. But they're great. Like he posted pages from this when he started doing this, and everybody was taking guesses as to what it was, and nobody got it right. So, it's a 3. Right. Easy.
Chad, you're up next.
I'm gonna go just slightly lower, say 3.25. Like I said, this felt to me like the movie treatment, and it was satisfying as a story, but it was a little bit paint by numbers. The art, the Riley Rossmo cartooning, I did find wonderful. If this is something you're mildly interested in, like it gives you all the beats you need to know about Sandman. It introduces Sandy at the end. You get the Justice Society showing up, and it was a fun story along the way where he fights his equal but opposite called the Fog, like they do in all the movies. Yeah, it's fun. 3.25.
Okay. I'll go next. I honestly, if you couldn't tell by this particular episode, I was pretty disappointed in Robert's writing overall, or just the overall story. There were interesting parts, but as a whole, as a narrative, the mystery was telegraphed from the start. The fog coming out of nowhere, and I didn't understand what the heck that guy's, there were just a lot of inconsistencies, and I don't think it was his strongest work. So just based on the writing, I'd probably give this like a 1.5. Like, I really didn't like the story. But because of the Riley Rossmo art, that elevates it so much. I think it goes up a whole other point from that. So I'm going to give it a 2.5. I mean, that art saves it. That art would make me buy this book every single month, despite having a fairly mediocre storyline. And I'm a huge fan of Golden Age stuff, but not this. Maybe it's because I liked Sandman Mystery Theater, and this wasn't it. Maybe that was actually the biggest problem. J.A.
Yeah, I don't know if I would buy this if it was a regular series. I think it worked really well as 6-issue miniseries. It was very much like sort of those golden age movies, or those movies made in the 90s about golden age characters, like the Alec Baldwin Shadow movie or the Disney Rocketeer movie. It reminded me of those. Yes, it was paint by numbers. I could totally see Timothy Dalton doing, with his pencil mustache as the billionaire friend of the other millionaire, whatever. I think it's a 3. It's a fun story. It's easy to read. You can kind of see a lot of the plot turns coming a mile away, but that doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. The art is really great. There's some really standout panels and double page spreads. And I would totally recommend picking it up if it's released in trade. It's a really easy story to read on a weekend.
There you go. And some other comics that we hope are easy to read on weekends or weekdays for that matter are our recommendations. Yes, this is the time of every single show where we give you other books in addition to Wesley Dodds Sandman that you can pick up at your local comic book shop, whether it's eventually in trade or in single issues. Or, maybe you're going to be going through those buck bins making some of your own collections. I don't know if we've got any of those on the agenda, but we're going to start off with Chad. Chad, what do you got for us this week?
Okay, we were talking about how Wesley Dodds always reminds you of the Green Hornet. And you planted that seed in my brain earlier in the week, and I was like, oh, this is a good Green Hornet story. And then I was like, well, Green Hornet? What's better than the Green Hornet? But the Lone Ranger. And then I was like, what's the last Lone Ranger story I read? But it was one written by Mark Russell, who we've done a ton of Mark Russell books on this show. It has art by Bob Quinn, and it was collected as the Devil's Rope Saga. It was a 5-issue miniseries that came out in 2018, and it was just a really fun Lone Ranger story, and I have been waiting ever since to get another Lone Ranger tale by this art team. Turns out that's not going to happen, but what is happening is they have taken over the X-Men's X Factor book.
Ooh.
And so, coming out of the Krakoan age, you can see Mark Russell and Bob Q on the new X Factor, where they are mutant influencers of a type. And so, if you want to see what their collaborations look like and get an awesome Lone Ranger story along the way, go check out the Devil's Rope Saga and then pick up that X Factor stuff.
There you go. My recommendation is going to come next, and it was an amazing book that I found at Half Price Books for $3, which was a real steal. I mean, if you ever have an opportunity to go back in the clearance section, you might be finding some pretty good trade paperbacks back in a Half Price Books near you. But this one is kind of an interesting project. It won an Eisner back in the day, I think in 2005. And it's called The Amazing Adventures of the Escapist. And this is basically a collection of stories about a fictional crime fighter from the Golden Age, which was made up in a fictional novel by Michael Chabon. The novel is called The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, which is kind of a historical fiction account of two comic book creators, in the 1930s and 40s, and their creation, The Escapist. And it kind of melds a lot of the stories of comic book creators at that time and the struggles that they had. But I guess he just decided to give this character out to other comic book creators to say, like, hey, if the Escapist was a real superhero, what would be his adventures? And so you get this great little digest, and it is kind of digest size with stories, again, by Michael Chabon. But you also get other stories by, friend of the show, I hope at least, Howard Chaykin, as well as Kevin McCarthy. Mike Barron does a story. Jim Starlin does a story. Gene Colan does art in this collection. And there's even some awesome alternative covers by folks like Jeff Parker and Eric White and Jay Lee. And Just a lot of really, really great stuff. All about this, again, a fictional Golden Age character that could escape any trap as he worked for the secret organization known as the Golden Key against folks that were trying to oppress the world, called the Iron Chain. The agents of the Iron Chain. So it's kind of neat. For $3. Heck yeah. I'll take this any day. J.A.
All right, so mine's a little bit not Golden Age and out of left field, but I was reading it this week, so I'm recommending it. Also, you might see a YouTube video of the variant cover for the first issue of The White Widow by Sarah Gailey and art by Alessandro Miracolo. This is a 4-issue miniseries, came out in Marvel last year, that follows Yelena Belova as she moves out of New York into a small town to take up being a counselor and leadership mentor for assassins. Looking to downgrade her life a bit, slow down. She moves to a small town in the suburbs with her dog, Bint Clarton. Love that so much. She's helping other assassins and becomes a mentor to assassins of the world. And then it turns out that the town is being taken over by this evil corporation that's creating robot assassins, and she ends up fighting them. And it's 4 issues, lots of snark, some decent fighting scenes, and just great character study of the White Widow, someone who doesn't get a lot of publication in the Marvel Universe. Maybe a little bit more now that I don't know where they are with the MCU, but I mean, when you've got a Academy nominated actress playing the character, you figure they're going to go back to that well at some point.
Yeah.
The Florence Pugh push.
I believe she's part of Thunderbolts.
Yes.
The movie Thunderbolts, the motion picture.
Speaking of motion pictures and Yelena Belova, that reminds me of My Bologna, a Weird Al song. And
That's
I
right.
just watched Weird the other day, the Weird Al biography. The first 40 minutes of that movie is one of the funniest things I've seen, and then it keeps going. But the first 40 minutes, hilarious.
Okay. Well, a bonus recommendation from you,
There
from
you
our own Chad Smith. But Mikey, why don't you finish up with our comic book recommendation?
Yeah. So I am choosing to recommend, because we read a book by with artwork by Rossmo, Constantine the Hellblazer, a 13-issue run that came sort of after the end of the Vertigo Constantine Hellblazer series. Between that and the Rebirth Hellblazer, it's written by Ming Doyle and James Tynion IV, and has art by Raleigh Rossmo for most of the issues. I think there's a couple that he didn't do. But yeah, it's a really good series, and it got a little bit of flack when it came out because the Vertigo Hellblazer series ended with issue 300, and he was, that character was not an easy guy to like, but he had huge fans. I'm one of them. And when production art came out for this one, it seemed like they were kind of watering him down a little bit. And I don't think that's really true of this. I think he's not as much of a bastard as he is in that first run, but it's still quite a good and underrated run for the character. So it's called Constantine the Hellblazer. It ran 13 issues from back in 2015. So I don't know if it's collected or not. I don't know. So go find the 13 issues. I'm sure you guys can afford them. So.
Yeah.
And bind them.
Yeah, exactly.
Get them
Make your
bound.
own collection. You can find the issues. Just do that. And just do it ourselves. We don't need this. Yeah. Just do the same thing with golfers. Golfers, damn it.
We do that.
Golfers, damn it.
They'll lock us
Actually,
up
it
and
was
throw away the
collected.
key.
Actually, I take it back.
Little brown furred rodents.
It was collected in 2 trade paperbacks. There are 2 volumes.
Poor Mikey, trying to get in between the Caddyshack bit.
It's now time to wrap up this week's episode. Make sure that if you love this show and you love our hijinks, that you come back every single week to The Last Comic Shop. We're here with brand new episodes as we continue to count down to episode 200, which is right around the corner. Yes, October 15th. Mark your calendars. That will be our all-star studded cast, bringing it home to you with our review of the wonderfully famous book Watchmen. So yeah, you've heard of that one. You should
not the Watchmen.
Yes, Watchmen.
Let's get that clear. Let's get that out there.
But make sure that you're reviewing, and subscribing over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com so you don't miss out on that or any episodes until then.
There you go.
That's right.
You can also find us on the social media. We're at Last Comic Shop. Lots of different places. The Blue Skies, the old Twitters, the X's, which are the new Twitters. Not Mastodon, because I got us banned from that earlier. I still regret that.
Is that still a thing? Do people still Mastodon?
But anywho, or you can always circle back to the website. If you're not getting enough of those Golden Age covers, if you're not getting enough of the polls, if you're not getting enough of the comic book videos, you can always come back to www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com, where you can find what else, J.A.?
As always, there's a link to our merch store. You can get t-shirts, tote bags, coffee mugs, this week only gas masks.
Yeah.
So you never know. But branded. Last Comic Shop Podcast branded gas masks. So
right, exactly.
If you're stuck in the car going to a con with somebody who's had a bit too much to eat the night before, you're all good.
Yes, if you ever had to share a hotel room with Chad at one of these things, you might need a Last Comic Shop gas mask.
Hey, now, I talk. I don't know what else comes out of me, though. Anywho, we have other recommendations, which are a little bit more palatable, that we made here today, including but not limited to the book we read, Wesley, Dodds, Sandman. We also recommended The Lone Ranger by Mark Russell and Bob Q. We recommended The White Widow. We recommended The Escapists from Michael Chabon and a bunch of others. And then finally, the John Constantine Hellblazer, which features that Riley Rossmo art that we all gushed about this week. All that and more waits for you at your local comic shop, so make sure you stop by and find some cool stuff.
And until next week, I was the host of Most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Chad Smith, J. Scott, and the wonderful Mikey Wood. And we hope that you stay safe, stay cool, because the summer's still going on. You know, you want to.
It is.
And remember that if you're ever wondering what an astronaut's favorite snack food is, it's rocket chips.
Did you say rocket chips? Oh my God.
That's what he said.
That's what I said.
You guys don't pay me enough.
No.
Pay me anything.
The Last Comic Shop podcast was a 2024 Black Angus production.